Welcome to day 4 of storytelling, and this is a fast day because we're talking about the punchline, the climax. This is a part that doesn't last very long, so there isn't quite as much to say about it, but I do want to make a couple of distinctions. First off, this is what we're talking about where it's like get to the point. And if you ever hear get to the point or you see get to the point in the eyes of your listener, you haven't messed up the climax. You've messed up everything that comes before it. This is the part where you get that emotional release. It's the laugh. It's the, oh my God, I'm glad he was okay. It's, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. Whatever it is, this is where you're going to see the biggest emotional swing. If people are bored, it's not because of the climax. It's because of the setup. So I just want to make that clear. Coming back to our 2 general types, there are going to be different styles, generally speaking, of climaxes. In your funny stories, really the story is about the digression itself. Sometimes there's a story that rides or dies on its punchline, but typically it goes fast. You say the punchline and you're back into normal conversation. Other times, like I mentioned, the story is just completely about the fun that was had arriving at the end, and the punchline just gets breezed through completely. So what you'll see when people tend to tell funny stories is that the punchline doesn't get lingered on for too long. It's you hit the punchline, you get the laugh, and you are out. That's what people want to remember. When we come back to these purposeful stories, we tend to have something that comes after the climax. So if you're at a job interview and they're saying, tell me about a time where something went really wrong and you saved it, and the climax is that this project broke down and you stepped in the last minute and saved it, there's still more at the end. And that's where you kind of moralize. That's where you tell them the point of the story explicitly, what you learned. There's this resolution, this conclusion. And the same is oftentimes true of movies, right? I think of, this one was a little bit long, but I think back to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where there was a half hour after the climax of just tying up loose ends, what happened here. And it was because it wasn't funny necessarily. It was, where did these people go? How does this affect their world? That's what we want to be thinking. And if you remember back to day 1, when I told you the story of how I approached that woman back in DC and she remembered me months later, and then I came back to the conclusion was I was explaining to the men that I had spoken to, and a lot of them weren't even men at that point, they were just younger guys, was this is worthwhile. She was impacted in this in a way that changed her day for the better and that made a huge positive impression for such a long period of time. If you're nervous, that's normal. It doesn't mean that it's going to go terribly. I really spelled out the purpose of the story, and that is what you oftentimes do here. So even if it's a best man speech or something like that, you're going to come back and you're going to state the thesis here. So I don't want to talk too much. I'll give you a couple examples because the climax doesn't have to take so long. It can be a punch and out.